Hello and welcome, I'm Dave. In today's lesson, we'll learn how to apply permissions in our Next.js full-stack application. I'll provide a link to all resources in the description. And I'll also provide a link to join my Discord server where you can discuss this Next.js full-stack project with fellow students, ask questions, and help each other out. Hey guys, a big shout out and thank you to Sentry for making this full-stack Next.js educational video series possible. Sentry is defining debuggability in full-stack web applications, and I consider Sentry to be an essential part of my tech stack. From error reporting, logging, and tracking to identifying performance issues with tracing, to user session replays, and much more, Sentry will help you write and ship code that delivers exceptional user experiences. Follow the Sentry links in the video description or just visit Sentry.io and use the code davegray to get 3 months of the Sentry team plan for free. In this Next.js full-stack projects series, I'm using the same tech stack that I've been working with on a major project at my job over the past year. For viewers, students, and subscribers that have asked what I work with on a daily basis, this is definitely the tutorial series to watch. Starting out today by once again looking at our user stories for the Repair Shop app, and let me scroll up just a little bit. In the last few lessons, we have focused on 14 and 15. 14 is all users can create and view tickets, and 15 is all users can create, edit, and view customers. And neither one of these will really be completed until we complete our server actions and save the data to the database, whether it is a new record or it's a record we're editing. However, today we're going to focus on 16 and 17, where we apply permissions. 16 says employees can only edit their assigned tickets, meaning they can't edit any other tickets. However, it is also implied that employees can view the tickets as is stated above. Then below that, number 17 says managers and admins can view, edit, and delete all tickets. Well, really, I don't know about delete, but we could consider putting that in there. We might want to make them inactive, but I think overall we'll want to keep a history. So we won't work on delete today, but we'll want to give permissions to actually view and edit all the tickets for a manager and admin. And by implication here, that applies essentially what I'm saying, that employees cannot edit all tickets. They can only edit the ones they're assigned to. Okay, with that said, let's get started. I'm on the NPM website and we're looking at the Kinde package for Next.js. Back in lesson 2 of this series, we installed Kinde, set it all up for our project where we log in now to our application. But that was a few weeks ago as far as the timeline for when I'm creating this series. Now, if you're further along in the future, it could be that everything was supported. But back at that time, of course, we installed Kinde. We did it with legacy peer dependencies because it wasn't supporting Next.js 15. A newsletter came out from Kinde, an email that I received saying Kinde now supports Next.js 15. However, remember that React 19 is still not a stable version yet, and we're using React 19 with Next.js 15. So we want to install the latest version of Kinde Next.js now, but we also still want to use that legacy peer deps flag just because we're also using React 19. We're going to need that in there. So right now, Kinde is on version 2.4.6 that we can see right here. I'll just highlight that with my mouse. And so when we install that, that's what we should see in our package JSON. Again, if you're watching this in the future, you probably don't have any of those issues and you'll probably have a newer version of Kinde than we're going to install right now. Okay, back in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to press Control and the back tick to open up a terminal window, and let's get the newest version of Kinde installed. So I'll type npm I, and then I want the @ symbol, Kinde with an E -oss / Kinde with an E once again, -auth Next.js. But I'm not going to stop there. We're going to use another package that they provide today too, because remember, in our tickets form, we need to supply the names of all users. And we can't just get that with a normal Kinde account. We're going to have to set something else up that will allow us to request the names of all the users that we can put in there in that tech menu, so the text can be assigned tickets. So with that said, let's install @Kinde /management dash API dash JS. So two different kind dependencies we're installing right now. We still need the dash dash legacy dash peer dash deps flag right now. Again, if you're watching this in the future, you may not need that. But I've been using it throughout the series because as I'm making this, Next.js 15 is very new and we're still using React 19 that is not on a stable version yet. So I'll press enter and we'll install both of these packages into our project, and then we can look at our package JSON. So there it's completed now. I noticed, and you may not see this in the future again, I noticed just here in the last week or so, there is one high severity vulnerability noted that may worry some of you if you're watching this right when I create this video. This is a dependency inside of Next.js itself. So I am sure the very next incremental release of Next.js, I think it's on 15.0.3 right now, and you could update right now to see if this would go away. But I think the next incremental release, maybe 15.0.4 or somewhere around there, will probably take care of this as well. So no worries there. Let's go ahead and close this, open the file tree, and let's look at that package JSON to see what we've added here from Kind. So now you can see we do have 2.4.6 installed. The Kinde Management API dependency that we installed, Management API-JS, that's very new. It is on 0.11.0. So if you're watching this in the future, of course, you can expect this to probably be a higher number as well. And now I'm on the Kind homepage at kind.com. And remember, we set up our Kind account in lesson 2 of this series. So what you need to do right now is sign into your account. I'll sign into mine and I'll meet you at the dashboard homepage. Okay, I am now at the Kind dashboard homepage. It says, "Good afternoon, Dave." And going back to lesson 2, we just set up one user. And really, we just set it up so we could log in. We didn't do a whole lot else, but we did set up some permissions. I believe, let's go to users and check that. No, let's come back out of there, go to settings, and we'll scroll down here. And there we have user management. There are roles and permissions. Now, Kind is very powerful. You can assign permissions to roles, and then anytime you assign a role to a user, they will automatically get all of the permissions assigned to that role. And you can do a lot of things with that. However, we're using a free account at Kind, and that supports only 2 roles, but it supports up to 10 permissions. So what I'm going to do is just work with permissions in this project. But just so you know, you can do much more with this. And the best way to do it would be to create various roles for your organization that have permissions. And then you could still assign additional permissions. And we'll see that here. So we have this create permissions that can be assigned to different roles, as I was talking about. However, we can just have the various permissions here without roles as well. And it says upgrade to add more than 10 permissions, which you could easily do in an organization. However, we're keeping this simple in this project, and we basically have user, manager, and admin. But I'm going to even keep it simpler than that, because really, any user that we create is an employee, and so they don't even have to have a role. As long as they're not a manager or an admin, by default, they're a user. So we probably won't apply that. However, we'll also have managers and admins. And one thing we can do is anybody that is an admin, we can also give them more than one permission. So we can give an admin both manager permission and admin permission. And then, of course, give just managers that are not admins, only give them the manager permission. So that's probably what we'll do. Now let's go back to the home page and look at the user we created here. So users, and you would see your user listed here. You shouldn't see me listed here. This should be you with your email address. And I can scroll over here to the right and click the 3 dots, choose View Profile. And then I get a menu for this specific user, and I can look at the permissions here. Here's the roles. I haven't assigned any roles, and as I mentioned, you could do that, but I can just add additional permissions, and that's how I'm going to handle this, is just through permissions. So let's add permissions, and now it's as simple as just checking the boxes. So I'm going to make my main email address here, dave@davegray.codes, not only an admin, but also a manager. And that's what we would do for the owner of the computer repair shop as well, as he would use this to add other users. We would make him an admin and a manager. So after that, I'm going to save. Now what you'll also want to do is add one more user. So if we come back to the home page, go to users, we can add user. So you'll want to have one more actual working email address. Most people probably have more than one at this point. If you don't, you could get a free one from several different services, but you just want one more email address that will not be a manager or an admin. We don't want to assign a role to this next user we're going to set up. So I'm going to set up mine, and I'm going to put in some other email address here. And then once again, I'll meet you back at the Kinde dashboard homepage. Okay, I've created my second user, and I'm back here at the Kinde dashboard, the homepage for Kinde once we're logged in. And you can see it now says I have 2 users. Now, it didn't say that right away. I had to actually refresh a couple of times. So if that happens to you, no worries, you should have 2 users. And of course, you can click users, go to that users menu, and look at both of them if you want to. Now, that said, the original user you had should be both a user that has admin and manager permissions. And then the new user you just created shouldn't have any of those permissions. You could give it the user permissions if you wanted to, or you could just not give it any permissions. So it's just by default, it's not going to be a manager or an admin type user. Okay, so now that we have all of that, let's look at the next thing we can do here in Kinde. Remember, we installed that Management API dependency as well for Kinde, and we need a second application for that, actually a machine-to-machine application. And we add that here in our Kinde dashboard as well. So let's click Add Application. And now in the window that pops up, it wants an application name. I'm just going to name it Management API, all one word like that. You can name it something different if you want to. Choose machine to machine type right here, and then click Save. And now we're on the details page for our Management API application here. We do not need to select a language/framework. That is optional, so we can just leave that as is. It says type machine to machine, but it's going to give us some keys once again, a client ID, a client secret, and a domain. And we need to put all of these into that .env.local where we have our other Kinde secrets. And here I'm looking at the documentation for the Kinde Management API that we installed. And so just to be clear, it says here under configuration, the following env variables are required to run the project. So what you're going to need is the Kinde domain defined, the Kinde Management Client ID, and the Kinde Management Client Secret. All 3 of these, specifically named like this, should be defined in your .env.local file that we have in the project. Once again, I can't show you my values, and of course, you want to make sure that your .env file or .env.local is not sent to GitHub. It should be listed in your git ignore, but we've gone over that in the previous previous lessons of this series as well, probably a lot in lesson 2 when we were setting up Kinde. So you should know, just set these 3 up with the values you see in your Kinde dashboard over here. Here's the domain, here's the client ID, here's the client secret. I'm going to set those up in my VS Code as well. And then let's once again meet back at the Kinde dashboard. And I'm once again back at the Kinde dashboard homepage. I have set up those 3 environment variables for the Management API in my .env.local file in the project. Now the next thing we need to do is once again go to the view details on the machine-to-machine application that we just set up. Now let's select APIs from the menu over here on the left, and we should see the Kinde Management API right here. But notice it's not authorized yet, so let's go ahead and click the 3 dots and choose Authorize Application. It says we're authorized and we're good to go. After that, we still need to set up scopes. So essentially, scope is what is allowed through the Management API. It lets you manage each little portion of information, and that's a good thing. So now let's click Manage Scopes from that same 3 dots. And there are many choices here, but we just want to read the users. So let's scroll down past all of the create, past all of the delete, and now we're into read. and we should find read users in this list. As I continue to look, there it is. So we've got user identities, user properties. What we actually want is read users. So let's go ahead and turn that on and click save. And now really we're good to go. I'm going to click the home page once again to just come back here to the dashboard homepage. And before we leave, let's do something that we could have done back in lesson 2, but we didn't. And that was to just click the design link over here. And notice we can control what is in the web page. So if you have your own PNG or SVG that you want to upload, it will present a different one for light and dark modes, for example. A fave icon as well. Oh, by the way, you'll see this on the sign-in page, and you'll see it in the emails you receive with those codes as well. And then here's the fave icon area, and then we can choose the theme. I'm going to go with user preference. So that will set it to light if the user prefers light, and set it to dark if the user prefers dark. Now, pages and background, I'm pretty much good with what they have here. A very dark color if the user chooses dark, very light if they choose light. Of course, if you have brand colors, you could use those because this is under brand actually. You can change the border radius on the cards, and you can change the color of the buttons. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to do that. So if the background color is dark, if our choice is dark essentially, then I want a white button, 4, 5, 6, and then I want dark lettering. And that's what we should get here with the text color dark and the background color for the button. That's the dark theme. The light theme I'll just leave as is. And we've got border radius controls on the input field and on the buttons. And so the light theme text color here, so we have a blue for a link, but the dark theme text color here, let's maybe put this into a white color for a link once again. I believe that's 6 Fs for that hexadecimal there of white. And if we get any of this wrong, we'll be able to check. We'll just click save here, and we can check by clicking sign in over here on the left. And now my preference is dark. So that's what it's showing right now because we chose user preference. So you can see we have the light text on the dark background. So that looks good. And then we would have the confirm sign in page where we receive the code and we want to enter that in. And that looks good too. Now what we didn't provide yet back here on the brand page is a logo. And I have one of those I'm going to drop in to the code for the course resources that you can get from this lesson. I believe we're on lesson 7 right now. So look for the icon.png inside the app directory because Next.js can also use that as a fave icon. And you can use that if you want to, or you can create your own, but follow the guidelines here. It needs to be smaller than 1 megabyte here for kind. And likewise, they want the fave icon to be either 48 by 48 or 96 by 96 and smaller than 5K. I'm using the same file for both. I use it in the fallback because it's a PNG. I don't have the SVG for that. And I can use it here for both as well. So you can grab that from the course resources or use your own. Back in VS Code, you can see where I was working with the .env.local file here to the left. Let me scroll up, and I am just going to click somewhere here in the area of the globals.css because that's inside the app directory, and that is where I want to have that icon.png. So I'm just going to drag it over here and put it in. You can see it's a very basic laptop here, actually taken from the emoji. So I've created a PNG from that. And you can use that if you want to. If not, of course, you can use your own. But let's go ahead and upload that to Kind as well. So let's go back to Kind, and I'm going to upload this icon.png. Back in the browser, I am back on the brand page here in Kind. I'm going to click Upload Image. Now, you may need to browse to where you find your file. Here, mine is right here, nice and handy. But of course, you could browse to it in your File Explorer. So choose Open, and from there, you can see how the logo is now added. Let me go ahead and upload the image once again for the other theme. Now you could have a different light and dark image as well. Also for the fave icon, since I have a 96 by 96 image, I believe, I can use it right here. It also can't exceed, what did it say? It must be smaller than 5 kilobytes. So I've gone ahead and applied all three of those images. Everything else is the same. Let's look at the sign in page once again. Now you can see that the image is used on the sign in and on the confirm sign in. Those are the two we're using. We're not using a sign up or confirm sign up, and we're not using request access either. Just those two for this project. And of course, use whatever image you want. Now let's get back to permissions. Okay, back in VS Code now. Let's open a terminal window with control in the backtick, and we should be ready to start the project with npm run dev. This should start on localhost 3000. We don't need to go to the browser and log in yet. I just wanted to go ahead and start the project, and we'll continue from there. And we're going to begin working on the customers form route that we have here. So we're in customers, and then we want to go to the form directory, and then let's go to the page.tsx. And here I'll scroll up towards the top. I'll also press Control B to hide the file tree to have just a little more room. One thing we didn't add to this server component that is page.tsx on our customer form route is metadata. And this kind of lets us walk through the logic of the page in a simplified way. So this will be a good review today before we get started on the rest of the page. We'll have export async function, and we will generate metadata because we just provided a fave icon, and that will be used now in our project. So we might as well have some metadata, at least a title to go with that. What we're going to have here, and I started to type it out, but are the same params that we would have in the component down here itself. So we can just copy these params. It's the search params. Then of course you can see the type of the search params here. So let's just paste that in, and it should be the same. So after that, we want curly braces because generate metadata is its own function. And now let's think about what we have here. So as this function starts out, we get a customer ID when we await the search params. So let's do the same thing to generate metadata because we'll base our logic on that customer ID. So first, if we do not have a customer ID, then we know we're creating a new customer. So the title of the page could be new customer. After that, we don't really need an else. We can just have another return, because if there is not a customer ID, the function ends here with the return keyword. So this means there is a customer ID at this point. And here we can return title. And now let's use a template literal because we can say edit customer number, and we can actually insert what customer number this is. This would be the customer ID. So that's our logic for the page. If we don't have a customer ID, we have a new customer. And if we do have a customer ID, well, then we're editing a customer. So that breaks it down simply. We'll do the same thing for the ticket form when we get to it, and it's just a little more complex. But this lets you break it down nice and easy before you get into the other function. If you do it in that order, of course, we did it in the reverse, but it is a good review. So this is what you'll see up in the tab by the fave icon in your browser. And you can provide more metadata for any page. Of course, this particular project does not need to be found in search engines, and that's often what metadata is used for. This is a back-end project for a computer repair store that only the employees log into. Okay, no further changes to the page.tsx on our customer form route. Let's go directly to the customer form itself. Control B to hide that file tree once again, and I'm going to scroll up to the top because we have a new import to work with. Let me go ahead and import that maybe after these inputs that we have here. I'm going to say import use kind browser client. That should come from @ kind, there we go. It's not the management one, it is the Kinde Auth Next.js. So we've got the use kind browser client hook that we're going to use now. Let's go ahead and copy that with Control C just so I don't have to type it again. And now we'll come down to our customer form component. And it's the first thing I want to use here inside the component. So we'll have just a little bit of space. Then I'll say const, and we can destructure some things that we want to get. I want to give a couple of examples here. So I'm going to use a few things. We have a get permission function. There's also a get permissions. And then there is an is loading state, amongst others. And of course, always reference the docs if you want to learn more about anything I'm using in this project. But there we have the use kind browser client. I'm pulling in two different functions, get permission and get permissions. Then we have an is loading state. And what I want to do for this project is just define an is manager, because remember, anybody that is an admin, I'm also going to give them manager permissions by default. So I don't really need to check to see if they're an admin or a manager. I just need to know if they're a manager. So I'm going to define is manager. I'm going to set this equal to the opposite of is loading, because if is loading is true, then I don't really want the manager to be true. So, or is manager to be true. But if is loading is false, which is what that indicates with the exclamation mark, then I would want is manager to possibly be defined. And we'll get that definition by getting the get permission function and passing in the permission we're looking for, which is manager. And then we also need to get the is granted property. So there we go. That's how I'm going to define it. But I want to give you another example with get permissions. Get permissions can provide you with an array of permissions. So say we have a user that could be an admin or a manager, you could possibly get both of those permissions back at the same time. So this isn't something I'm going to keep in the code. I just want to show you if you wanted to do it. So for example, I would say const permission object, and I would set that equal to get permissions. Now, once I got that object, I could check it kind of like we did is manager. Let me say const is authorized, and I would set this equal to checking that is loading once again, because I want that to make sure it's loaded first before we check anything else, or we could have an error. And then we're going to check the permission object dot permissions, and that's an array of the different permissions that the user would have. And then you would say check sum. So if any one of these were true, for example, you'd have permission, pass that in, and then we could say, okay, if the permission equals manager, let me press Alt-Z to wrap that down, then we could have or the permission equals admin. So that would also work. Just an example of something you could do there. So I'm not going to leave this in the code. You just kind of want to know the possibilities. And you could look for other possibilities in the kind documentation as well. Once again, I just need to pretty much check, do they at least have manager permissions? Because I know any admin is also going to have manager permissions. And I guess I could get rid of the get permissions function that we see right here as well. And now we're ready to scroll down and work on some of the rest of the component. One of the things I want to do is come back to this title that we have at the top. Now, we did a little bit better job on the tickets form title, where we checked a couple of things and then we gave the ticket ID number as well. So right now we have either edit customer form or new customer form, but I think we can give some more detail. So instead of form right here, let's once again put in a ternary, and we can check that customer ID. And then if we do have a customer ID, then we can say we're editing a specific number. So let's say number, and now let's go ahead and insert whatever that customer ID is. And otherwise, then we can go ahead and put in the word form in our ternary. So we're either going to have new customer form or edit customer number and have the ID of the customer. So I think we're providing a little more detail there. Just making a little fix or two as we work our way down the form. So now I'm scrolling on down the form, and we're going to want to look at something else here, something we didn't add actually. We got to notes, but we never put in whether the customer was active or not. And the reason we didn't do that is because only admins and managers should really be able to adjust whether the customer is active. We're not deleting customers, but we could make them inactive. We don't want everybody to do that. Now I scrolled down to where I actually want to put that checkbox, but what I didn't do was put the active value here inside the default values. So that's what we should do first. So up at the top in the default values, we'll have active, and it is customer active, and either we have that, or if not, we want it to default to true because any new customer will automatically be active. And now let's scroll just a little bit higher because I honestly don't think we had a checkbox on this form already. So let's import our checkbox with label as well. And now we can use it where I originally scrolled to on the page. So we're going to put this below the notes. Let's scroll all the way down before our save button and after our notes, and let's start our checkbox with label component. And it's going to have the same schema passed into it that we passed to everything else on the form. After that, it should have a field title. Let's set that to active, and the name in schema should be active, all lowercase. And then we're going to have a message. Our checkbox, if you remember from the ticket form, checkbox does have a message prop, and we'll just say yes here as well. Then we can close out the component. Now the problem we currently have is everybody can see this checkbox with label, and everybody can use the checkbox with label. We really don't need to show it at all unless, of course, we have a customer that we want to edit. And then if we're editing a customer, we only want to let managers and admins edit this field. So let's go ahead and put this inside of a ternary as well. So we're going to wrap it here. The first thing I'm going to check, let's think about this in a forward manner. I'm actually going to have a small chain ternary. I know not everybody likes them, but it's very useful at this point. Let's check is loading first. And if is loading is true, we're going to provide a small is loading state that just says loading with 3 dots. But then if loading is not true, then we're going to check is manager. So this is where it's a chain ternary. I'm checking another possibility here. So now if we do have manager permissions, then we're going to be able to view this checkbox with label. And then if not, we'll just return null. So that's a couple of checks there. So let me walk through this again for you. First of all, we'll quickly, it'll just be a brief moment, hopefully, that we would be loading. But so we don't get so much of a content layout shift on the page, we'll provide just a little line here that says loading, and then shortly after the checkbox input would take its place. Then we will see a little bit of a shift if we have loading and the person is not a manager, just a regular employee, because they'll have loading and then this will go away. So either way, we're going to have a bit of a content layout shift. So you may or may not want the loading there. It just depends, I guess, what type of user you want to see that shift with. So this is a client-side approach, and I did want to show how to do this on this page to show the is loading state, and then also to, of course, show an input only if there is permission to use the input. And we've done all that with the active state here. However, on the ticket form, we're going to take another approach. So let's go back to the file tree, and from there, let's go down to the tickets directory, and then inside the form directory, and there we want the page TSX. So we're looking at the server component for the tickets form route that we have in our application. And let's scroll to the top. I'll also press Alt-Z to wrap any code that's headed off the page. And we're going to start with a couple of new imports once again. So here I'm going to import get kind server session. That comes from kind OSS, kind auth, Next.js /server. So that looks correct. Then we have another import, and this is going to be import users with a capital U, and then init, and I want to rename this init. That is a very general name, and I know the Kinde Management API JS dependency is fairly new, but I hope they rename this function because that's just too generic. I'm going to name it kind init. Okay, from there I'm going to say from @kind/management, there we are, API JS, and dashes between those. Okay, now we have both the imports. Let's scroll down just a little bit. We want to come after checking for customer ID and ticket ID because there's no point in checking anything from any API if we don't have the required information. So it needs to be after this early return where the ticket ID and customer ID were required. So I want to get two functions from kind. So I'll say const, and inside curly braces, I'm going to get permission, and I'm also going to get user. And I'm going to set this equal to get kind server session. After that, I am going to say const, and I'm going to have brackets, not curly braces, and I'm going to define manager permission and also user. And then I am going to await, and I'm going to use promise.all. And inside this promise.all, and I'll put brackets once again, there we'll have our different calls to the function. So we'll have get permission. Once again, let's pass in manager. And then after that, we're also going to call get user. And we don't need to pass anything in there. Now, this promise all helps us avoid a waterfall. So we don't have to await one request and then await another. We can request both at the same time. I'm going to scroll for a little room, but after that, we need to go ahead and still define our isManager. I'm going to set this equal to the manager permission, and then I want to check the isGranted property right there. And now I will know if we have somebody that has manager permissions or not. Now I'm going to scroll for some room, but I'm also just going to check the logic flow that we put in before. So we have our customer. If we have a customer ID passed in to the ticket page, now we know we're creating a new ticket for this customer. That overrules or overrides if a ticket ID is passed in. We're going to check the customer ID first. So if, for example, I believe a comment asked about this, if we passed in a customer ID and a ticket ID, well, the ticket ID wouldn't really matter. If a customer ID is passed into this route, we know we're creating a new ticket for that customer. Now, if we don't have a customer ID and we do have a ticket ID, then we know we're editing a specific ticket. And as handled up here, of course, if we don't have either one, well, then we give the appropriate message to the user. So here we're checking the customer. And first of all, if we do have a customer ID, but that customer is not found, then we send the appropriate message. Then if the customer is not active, we also send the appropriate message. And then, of course, we're ready to return the ticket form. And here is where we're going to provide some more information. Let's go ahead and get rid of that console log. But now we definitely need to put some more information here. Let's start an if statement, and we'll say if isManager, because that would either be true or false. Then we can decide what we're doing inside of the if statement. And here we're going to go ahead and have an else as well. And we can quickly populate the else because it's just going to be what we already had. So this is what happens if they are not a manager or anybody that has any manager permissions. But if they are, we need to call that kind init. Remember, I renamed that init function, kind init. This, I'll put a note here, this initializes the kind management API. Then we can say const, and inside of curly braces users, set this equal to await users with the capital U. Remember, we imported that, and call get users. This is where we're getting our list of users. These will be the texts that could be assigned to a ticket. So now let's define these texts because we need to use them in a select dropdown. So they need to be objects that have IDs as well as descriptions. So here, let's say const text equals users, and this will be a ternary. So if we have users, we're going to map over the users. So users.map, and for each user inside here, go ahead and create an object, and we'll have an ID that will be user.email. And let's go ahead and put a comma there, and then we'll have a description. And this will be user.email as well. Now, after that, for example, if we don't have users, let's go ahead and apply an empty array. So either way, we know text is going to be an array. And then finally, we want to return the ticket form once again, just like we are down here, except we also want to pass those texts down so they can populate that menu. So we'll set text equal to text here. And let's go ahead and look at the ticket form because it looks like we need to put text in the prop here as well. So prop, and we'll have text. And oh yeah, that needs to be optional because it won't always be passed in. But if we do have text, that will be an object that has an ID that is a string, and it has a description that is also a string. And of course, this will be an array of those objects. So let's go ahead and put the array at the end. And now that we've added that prop, we can see that we've got a little bit of red there. TypeScript still isn't happy, so there's something wrong that it is not entirely happy about. And it looks like that we could have a type of ID or description that is string or undefined. Now we know for a fact if we have users that they will have an email, so it won't be an undefined value. So let's go ahead and just use the exclamation mark here as we can in TypeScript to say, yes, we know we're going to have a value. Those values will not be undefined. And that gets rid of our TypeScript issue. Now let's copy our if-else statement, and we'll just make a few changes as we scroll below and look at the edit ticket form possibilities here. So it all starts out the same. We have the ticket. If there is no ticket, an appropriate message is sent. If there is a ticket, well, then we need to get the customer associated with the ticket. Let's go ahead and delete the other console logs we had left in here as well. And you can see currently we're passing the ticket form with customer and ticket here to close. Let's paste in what we have instead. And you can see we're going to need to do just a little bit different here than this line. So we won't keep this line. We're going to need to pass in ticket, of course, because these are editable tickets now in this portion of our logic. So we want to pass ticket in both lines. So there's ticket, and we'll also need ticket below. So now our logic for the isManager portion is essentially complete. It's basically the same, except now we're passing in the existing ticket here as well, because we'll once again be able to assign a text. So we need to pass those texts down to the component. But on this part of it, the else, we're not quite finished because we're not supposed to allow just anyone to edit any ticket. The tech email has to match the user email. So let's go ahead and figure that out. Now, you could do this in a variety of ways, I should mention, and some may prefer a different way. You could actually pass the user email down, as we've already been able to get that here inside of the server component. And then you could do the logic inside of the client component if you wanted to. At that point, you could check the customer.tech value if it equals that user email. I'm going to go ahead and check it here. I think it's a better pattern this way because Next.js can pre-render some things. And this is why I like doing this. I wanted to show the client version and how we could use the kind hook, the use kind browser client, I believe is what it was called. But I wanted to also show how you can do this on the server. And this is the pattern that I prefer. I prefer to get all of the information that I can possibly get in my server component, have everything possible provided to my component already for pre-rendering, and then only request or do anything extra in the client if it's necessary. So here I'm going to define is editable, and I'm going to set this equal to user.email. So we should have the user email there to see if it's equal to ticket.tech. So is it equal to the email assigned to the ticket? And that's what the tech field is. So this being the equals here, the strict equals, we're going to get a Boolean return here. This will either be true or false. Now that said, I want to go ahead and pass that in. So I'm passing customer ticket. I'm also going to pass is editable. And of course, we'll make this an optional prop. So we won't always have to pass it. We'll also possibly provide a default value. So I'm passing down is editable here inside of the server component. It's going down to the client component ticket form. Let's look at ticket form here, and let's go ahead and put in that prop is editable. Make it optional, and we'll make it a Boolean. From there, we also need to, of course, have it received here inside of ticket form. And we needed to do the same with text as well, I should mention. So here's text. But now let's say is editable, and we'll set this equal to false by default. Actually, we should set it equal to true by default because we're not passing that in when there is a new ticket either, and new tickets should be able to be set up. They just can't necessarily be assigned, which is a different permission that we're looking at as well. So speaking of, as we're here in the client ticket form, how do we know if somebody is a manager here in the client or if it can be assigned? I'm not pulling in that hook from Kinde at this point. Well, we know because only managers receive this text prop. Remember, this is optional too. So let's go ahead and check that. And that will allow us to know whether anything can be adjusted by a manager or not. So I'm going to say const is manager. I'm going to set this equal to array.isArray and pass in text. So this would be true or false, and it has to be an array. And then we'll know if we actually have somebody that has manager permissions. Okay, I want to quickly scroll up to see, yes, we do have the select with label imported. We just hadn't used it in the previous tutorial. We're going to use it now because we're getting text data that we will populate that select menu with. So let's go ahead and scroll down, as the things we're doing now are going to impact pretty much every input on this ticket form, because it's really going to depend whether the form is editable or not. And so we need to apply that to the tickets. Then we also need to consider whether we're displaying that select menu or not for managers. So as I scroll down, let's get to the first input. And this is how we're going to enable editing or not. I'm going to use the disabled prop. I'm going to set this equal to what I want. If disabled is true, that means it's not editable. So I want the opposite of is editable. If is editable is true, then we would set it this way. So what we have here essentially, if is editable is false, then we want disabled set to true. I hope I didn't confuse anybody there, but you want the opposite. We know is editable is true, that means disabled is false. Okay, from there we're going to do the same thing to the next input. Here we had disabled just set to true for the tech. Well, that's really, I guess we want to leave it that way, and we want to use the select here. So let's go ahead and do that instead of just putting a different disabled prop. Let's go ahead and put is manager and start a ternary statement with parentheses. Now I'm going to put this input label. I'm going to Control X to copy. I'm actually going to put this inside of the back half of the ternary here. And this will remain as is. Nothing's wrong with it. I just don't have anything in the front part of the ternary yet. So if is manager is true, we want to use the select with label. And once again, we'll want to use this insert ticket schema type. And then for props, we'll go ahead and say field title. I'll set this equal to tech ID, and then name in schema is going to be equal to tech. And then I'm going to pass in data. And if you remember this component, it receives an array of data, and that data is in the form of objects that have an ID and description. But I want to start off with adding one that is not in our list of possible employees, and that is our default possibility. So that is the ID, then it is new ticket at example.com, and the description is also pretty much the same thing, and that's what we defined before. So putting the same value in the ID and the description field for both the list that we had defined back in that server component when we were creating the data that gets passed down, and here. So that's just the first object. Now I'll press Alt-Z to wrap that down. But after that first object, we want to possibly have others, the existing employees. So I want ... text, and that would be the array of texts that are passed down. And then I need to remember to close out our select with label with the slash and the greater than sign, and then everything is fine No more red squigglies. So if isManager is true, we're using the select with label. If isManager is false, we're showing what we previously did before, which is a disabled input. So yes, we'll just leave that as true. Scrolling on down in the form, we have our completed checkbox. Well, really, we only need to show that if it's an existing ticket. If we're creating a new ticket, it's always going to be false. It's not completed yet. So we've set that value already, but we don't have to show the input for that in that situation. So let's check the ticket ID. Once again, have a ternary statement. If we do have a ticket ID, that means we're editing a ticket and we're going to show our checkbox. But if we don't, then we'll provide null once again. So we'll only show the checkbox for completed if we are editing. If we're creating a new ticket, there's really no point in showing that one. But thinking this through, still anyone can create a new ticket or edit a ticket. It's just they can only edit the tickets that match their email address if they're not a manager or admin. So we need to think about how to pass disabled into our checkbox with label. Let's start by passing the prop right here, but I don't think it's going to take it without some modification. So here we'll have our is editable that we're passing to the other fields as well. So yes, we know we need to modify this checkbox with label component. Let's just hold down the control key and click on it to open that component file, checkbox with label.tsx. Okay, now that we have that, let's go ahead and just create a disabled prop here. And that's going to be a Boolean. Oh, let's make it optional. It's going to be a Boolean. And then all we need to do is come down here and find the actual checkbox component from shadcn, and we can add disabled equals disabled. And of course, we need to remember to pass it into the function. Then we can give it a default value also. So here, disabled going to equal false by default. So that way the prop is not necessarily required, but it will still always have a value. Now everything looks good. We can close that component out, and now you can see it accepts the disabled prop here inside of our ticket form. We can scroll past the customer info as that's for display, but that's nothing that we're editing, and we're on to the description. So now let's do the same thing here. We'll have disabled equals, and it's the opposite of is editable. And then the buttons themselves. Well, there's no point in having a save or reset button if you can't edit the page to begin with. So once again, only if is editable is true do we even want to show these. So here we'll have is editable. And if it is editable, then we will show the buttons. So we can put both of them, or the div that wraps around them even, all inside of this first half of the ternary. And then otherwise, we can display null. That looks correct to me. Let's go ahead and save our changes, and from there we should check it out in the browser. Okay, I'm in the browser, I have the application running, and I've gone to tickets/form and then passed in the param customer ID equals 2. So we have a new ticket for customer 2. Notice we now have a select menu here with the tech ID, and I can choose any one of the emails that are available. So I've got the new ticket at example.com. I've also got my email dave@davegray.codes here, that is my admin email. And then I've just got my tech employee email, Dave on 11, and that is my band email. So I'd prefer, if you're going to email me at the dave@davegray.codes. But either way, those are my working emails that I'm using in this example. So everything is here, and either one can be assigned. And of course, you can just have the new ticket example as well. So that matches when it first comes in when a ticket is created. However, clearly an admin or manager could, of course, create a ticket right away that has either of these emails, but any other employee would have to use the new ticket, at least at first, because only the admin or manager could assign a different tech email to a ticket. Now let's look at an existing ticket ID. So I'll change the param up here in the URL to ticket ID equals 4. And we choose that, and here we go. Now, once again, I'm an admin. I'm logged in as my Dave at davegray.code. So I've got edit ticket number 4. I see the description. I can edit all the fields because I don't have to match the email that's assigned. I can be an admin and change any of these. I've got my completed checkbox and all the information. So now what I want to do, of course, is log out and then log back in with my other email address. You should do the same. So we'll see if we're lacking some of these permissions now because we won't be an admin or a manager with that other email address. But quickly before we do, let's go ahead and go to the customers page as well. So customers/form. There we should have a new customer form. We see the loading and then the active showed up there at the end. So yes, no. We could, of course, apply that same type of logic that we were kind of doing on the ticket page as well, because any new customer should always be active. So we could think that through just a little bit more as well. But then let's also pass in a customer ID here. If we're going to edit customer ID number 4, and yes, we've got all the information here, and this customer is active now, and we can edit, of course, that. Once again, let me reload and notice this area here as that area loads. Remember, we're using the client side, a hook here that does that. Then we get that information, and it loads it because I'm an admin. When we come back with the other email address, we shouldn't see this because we're not an admin. Okay, I logged out and now I've logged back in with my email address that is not a manager or admin, and you can see now I have all disabled inputs here, and the mouse indicates that when I mouse over as well, and we're getting the different color inside of the title and the tech field. And I don't have a select menu here for the tech. We also have a different color here inside of the text box, and really we should probably make that match the others. And I'm wondering if something might look better than green. So we'll go back to VS Code and look at those differences in just a little bit. So there we've got ticket ID 4 as if we were going to edit a ticket, but we can't. So we're just viewing this ticket. And maybe that's something else we could change too, because it still says edit ticket number 4. Maybe we could have it say view ticket if we don't have permission. Okay, after that, let's look at what happens if we're passing in a customer ID to the ticket form. And customer ID 2. Okay, new ticket form. We can't assign the tech, but we can put in a title. We can put in a description. So everything is really as it should be as far as the user stories go. Just a couple of nice little things we want to change here. New ticket form, that seems appropriate for this title. Okay, for there, let's go to the customers. Let's go ahead and keep that customer ID 2. Right now, edit customer ID 2. Well, that's fine. We can edit that customer, but notice there's no active here. We don't have access to go ahead and change the active status of a customer, and that's the way it should be. Other than that, when we create a new customer, so if we get rid of the customer ID altogether, we shouldn't see that active status either, and that should be, of course, the same for everyone because new customer should always be active. Okay, let's go back, and I'll just use the back arrow here to get back to our new ticket form. I talked about possibly changing something here. Yeah, instead of edit ticket, maybe we want that to say view ticket. We want the text colors to all match up, but these are just little things. I'll quickly change those in VS Code. Back in VS Code, I'm going to scroll up first of all to the title where I want to possibly put the word view in. And here we're checking the ticket ID. And after we check it, we have edit ticket and the ticket ID or just new ticket form. That's fine. But following this pattern, we can do just a little bit more here. So let's not just check the ticket ID. Let's also check and is editable. And if both of those are true at this point, then we would truly have the edit ticket ID. But then let's say if they're false, let's still just check to see if we have a ticket ID. And if we do have a ticket ID, then we can, of course, this is becoming a chained ternary once again, then we can deliver a different result. I'm going to copy this line here, but instead of edit ticket ID, we'll want it to say view. So I'll just paste that in, switch this word to view. We could do this more like I did in the customer form here recently. It would look even a little uglier possibly, but it would also work. So there's more than one way to do this. And then, of course, if we're not viewing this ticket, then we want to have a new ticket form. So you could kind of insert ternaries like I did on the customer form, not retype a few words, but I actually think this is a little more legible. Okay, with that fixed now, let's talk about the text color. We want the same text color for disabled in both the input with label and inside of our text area. So first of all, I'll hold down Control and click on the input with label because I wanted to change the color that we had as well. That green, I'm not so crazy about that. Let's change this to a yellow. I think it's going to stand out on that dark blue. Of course, you use whatever colors you want. So I've got yellow 300 there. Save that, and we want to also, of course, apply these same colors and the same opacity for the disabled possibility on the text area. So I'm going to start copying here for all of these disableds that we have on the input with label component. So we have text blue 500, or in dark mode, text yellow 300, and then disabled opacity 75. So copy all of that. Let's close that one, and let's find our text area component, text area with label. Hold down Control, click that. Find where it receives the class name. So we'll make sure that's still at the end. Create a template literal here. Paste in these other classes, Alt-Z to wrap it down. Give a space right there, and we need to insert the class name into that template literal and close that out. Now we've applied those same classes, and we can still pass in the class name and overwrite anything we want to as well. So it should have the same colors, and we should have changed that title. If we can go back to the browser, we should see all of this. Now it says view ticket number 4 because we don't have permission here, and we did change the color. If you don't like this color, you can make it any color you want. I think this makes it stand out a little more than the dark green did on this background. Let's switch, and let's look at a light one. Ooh, that's bright. But the blue stands out fairly well on the black or on the white background, so I think I'll keep that. Going back to dark or system here as fast as I can. I'm logged into the Neon account that we have set up now, and I have the SQL editor open, and I want to assign one ticket. We haven't created our server actions yet. We can't do that in the application. I want to assign a ticket to my user that is not a manager or does not have manager permissions, and make sure that user can indeed edit that. So first of all, I'm going to select from tickets where ID equals 4. So we'll first do that, and I'll click Run, and we should see the result here. And here's the one we've been looking at with the screen replacement title. Here's the description. I can scroll over, and we can see the tech is new-ticket at example.com. Well, let's go ahead and change that. So remember to use your email for your user that is not a manager or does not have manager permissions. So at this point, we're going to change this, and we're going to say update tickets, and then we set tech equal to, and this is where you would put in the email that you have that is not a manager. So I'll have daveon11@gmail.com, which is my other email. And then we want to say where ID equals 4. So we're specifying, you want to make sure you have this where clause, or it could set this for every ticket in your table. So specifically, we're updating this tech for this specific ticket. Okay, now I'm going to run, and it should say it executed successfully. Great. So now I want to come back. Once again, I'm going to double check myself here, select all from tickets where ID is equal to 4. So it should only select that one. There we go. Scroll over. You can see the new tech value is my other email address. So that's what we want. Did this here in Neon in the SQL editor. I love the Neon dashboard. Very easy to work with. Let's go back and check out our application once again now that this change has been made. Back in the project once again, here is ticket ID 4 that we were looking at before. Let's go ahead and reload this page and see if we have any different result. Well, we've got the right email here, but something isn't matching. So we're still not able to edit this. Let's go into VS Code and take a look. And just to show you the example here, I've put in a couple of console logs so we can see the user email versus the ticket tech. And let's see what's going on with that. When I open up the terminal, you can see the user email has some capitals here and the ticket tech does not. So we could handle this in a couple ways. One, we could make sure, of course, we enter that into our database in the exact same way. And of course, it will be that way when we use the select menu and we're pulling these emails out of our database from Kind. Kind is keeping our user database. Our ticket database, of course, is over there at Neon in our database. So what happens though when these don't match? Because I just did an insert and I typed it out in all lowercase. We can also fix that with JavaScript in our component, and we might as well because it's a better option. Let's close the terminal window quickly, and right here where we set the is editable and we're comparing the user email with a strict equals to the ticket tech, we should also use the string method .to lowercase and call that method on both of them. And that way, we're only comparing the same case to the same case, because that should be the way an email is. An email really doesn't matter if it's all lowercase or some mixed case with uppercase and lowercase like we saw in the other example. So now that we're comparing these, we'll still see the same results here in the console log, where we'll still see the different casing here, but we should have a different result for the is editable value. So let's go ahead and save this and go back to the browser once again to check everything. And now if I reload, this is what we expect. We can now edit the title. We can now edit the description. We should not be able to edit the tech. You can only do that if you're a manager, and this user is not a manager. So everything is working as expected. Back in VS Code once again, the tutorial has gotten a little long, but I can hopefully finish it up quickly. We just have a couple of quick things I had left out previously that I would like to add. So right now we're in the tickets directory and then in the form directory and back at the page.tsx. So the server component for the tickets form route. And inside of that, we did not add the generate metadata function yet, and I meant to do that earlier, so let's go ahead and quickly add that now. We'll say export async function, and then we'll call generate metadata. Now this is going to receive the same props as we received here inside of the page.tsx. So the search params, we'll grab all of that, so the destructured search params and the type, copy that, and just paste those here into the generate metadata function as well. So the exact same params, and there we have it. After that, we have the function itself, and here we want to, once again, just get the customer ID and ticket ID from the search params just like we do in the function below. So let's copy that as well, and we paste that in. So now we have customer ID and ticket ID, and we can use our logic here to determine what type of title we're giving the page here from this metadata. So let's say if we have no customer ID and no ticket ID, then we're going to use the return keyword, and this will end the function, and we'll provide a title, and that will say missing ticket ID or customer ID, because at least one of those are required. Okay, let's go down to our next possible logic here. So we'll say if customer ID, so we have a customer ID. At this point we want to return, and once again we'll have a title. So here we'll have title, and this would be new ticket for customer. And now we can insert, let's put the number sign first, and then insert the customer ID here inside of this template literal. Okay, so now we've got two different conditionals here. So finally, at this point, we know we probably have a ticket ID, but let's go ahead and use the if just to make sure. I'll say if ticket ID, then we're going to return, oops, we need curly braces once again. We'll have our title, and this would be edit ticket. Once again, it's put the number. Now we'll put in the ticket ID. So it's going to be one of these. We're either not going to have either, and this of course means if it gets past here, we're going to have one or the other. So here, if we have the customer ID, this is what we do. And if we have the ticket ID, this is what we do. And earlier when I talked about the logic, if we have a customer ID, it doesn't matter if we have a ticket ID. If we pass a customer ID into this route, then we're going to be creating a new ticket for that customer ID. But if there is no customer ID, we should have a ticket ID at this point, and then we'll be editing a ticket. Okay, now that we've completed the generate metadata, let's go ahead and save this file. And then we want to go to the customer directory, form directory inside, and then the customer form.tsx. This is the client component. And if you remember, I briefly talked about this active checkbox. Right now, if we're a manager, let me go ahead and hide the file tree. Now we can see all of this a little better. So right now, if we're a manager, we see this checkbox, but that means we also see it if it's a new customer. And we don't really want to see the active checkbox. If it's a new customer, we know the new customer will always be active, and so there's no real reason to have that there. So all we really need to do is check what we were checking in the title as well when we determined if we were showing new or edit. So we can say is manager and customer ID. Now we know not only do we have to have manager permissions, but we actually have to have a customer that we're editing. And if that's the case, then yes, we'll show this active checkbox. Okay, with those in place, we're ready to move to the next lesson where we're going to work on our server actions with Next Safe Action. A quick shout out to my patrons. Holy Coder is a progress provider. Sean Lynch and Gregory Perry are senior patrons. And my junior patrons, Isaac, Will, Stacy, Abe, Javier, Michael, Heath, Malik, thank you all so very much. You're helping me reach my goals. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection. And a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you. And thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.